Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the grimdark crucible of the 41st millennium, truth is rarely what it seems. The lines between hero and villain have long since been atomized in the fires of endless war. And yet, somewhere deep within the eye of terror and beyond the veil of reality, a question festers like a heretical wound. Could some of the galaxy's most reviled traitors, the Chaos Space Marines, be acting, in part, out of a twisted desire to save what remains of humanity? It is a notion as blasphemous as it is captivating. The same warriors who turned on the Emperor, who desecrated worlds and tore reality asunder with demonic pacts, may now, knowingly or not, be playing roles in a grander, darker salvation. Not all of them, not even most, but fragments. Cells, isolated warbands with motives drenched in ambiguity. Perhaps salvation does not always wear golden armor. Perhaps, in the age of darkness, it roars with 8-pointed stars and whispers through corrupted vox. There is a cold poetry to the Night Lords. Born of terror, raised in darkness, and trained to carve fear into the bones of empires, they were never heroes, not even before the heresy. But even monsters have purpose, and that purpose, buried beneath centuries of bloodshed and mutation, still whispers of something strangely noble. The Night Lords were always executioners, not conquerors. Their primarch, Conrad Kurds, foresaw the doom of the Imperium long before it came and tried, in his own mutilated way, to halt it. His methods were inexcusable, but his motive was terrifyingly pure. Kurds believed that only through fear, sheer, overwhelming, soul-crushing terror, could civilization be maintained. He saw corruption blossoming in the halls of Terra before the heresy ever sparked. He watched as the Emperor allowed tyrants to fester within the framework of imperial truth. For Kurds, terror was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was a scalpel to cut out rot. And his legion followed that principle initially. Worlds pacified through fear needed no garrisons. Crime ceased, not out of justice but out of dread. It was stability bought through nightmare, and it worked. But over time, fear consumed them. As the Imperium grew to fear the Night Lords more than the foes they defeated, the Legion's sense of purpose curdled into spite. They became the monsters the galaxy imagined them to be. Still, even in damnation, fragments of their original purpose remain. Certain warbands target tyrants and corrupt Imperial commanders with surgical precision. Some Night Lords ignore civilian populations entirely, focusing instead on eliminating high-ranking officials, ecclesiarchs, or commissars notorious for abuse. These acts, viewed in isolation, appear redemptive. The kind of justice the Imperium itself can no longer reliably provide. There are whispered reports from the edges of the segmentum obscurus of Night Lords arriving on planets not to enslave or destroy but to leave brutal warnings. A noble's palace found drenched in blood, the guilty slain, while the common folk are left untouched. A planet's entire upper ruling caste flayed alive. Their sins broadcast through the planet's voxnet, and nothing stolen, no sacrifice demanded. These are not random acts, they are executions, trials carried out in darkness, under the iron rule of terror. Their tools remain horror, their language remains pain, but their targets suggest a logic. Some Night Lords may still see themselves as the galaxy's last hopeless executioners. If the Imperium cannot cleanse itself, they will carve out its cancers, blade by screaming blade. It is not mercy, it is not forgiveness, it is vengeance twisted into justice. And in the endless madness of the 41st millennium, perhaps that is the only kind left. What's most haunting is that Kurze himself may have foreseen this path. In his final days, hunted by assassins and betrayed by the Imperium, he tried to protect in his own damned way. He did not rage. He accepted his death with eerie calm. His last recorded words, "I see the end and I am content," ring less like defeat and more like grim acceptance. As if he had always known the role his sons would play, long after he was gone. And maybe, just maybe, he hoped that in the ruin he had predicted, the Night Lords would not become rulers or gods, but the dark blade that would strike down tyrants too entrenched for any loyalist to reach. Not to save the Imperium, but to punish it, to haunt it, to remind it that fear, true fear, still has its uses, and that sometimes monsters serve a purpose no angel ever could. The Thousand Sons are a legion born from the need to understand a universe that defies comprehension. Even before their fall, they stood apart from their brother legions, not because they were proud, but because they were desperate. Desperate to control the uncontrollable, to contain the warp, to shield humanity from the madness that now threatens to consume it whole. Magnus the Red was not just a sorcerer. He was a scholar, a visionary, perhaps even a prophet. And his sons, in their quest for forbidden truths, may have stumbled not only into damnation, but into a cursed form of guardianship. To say they were betrayed is no hyperbole. The Thousand Sons warned the Emperor of Horus's treachery. They tried to act, breaking sacred laws only because silence meant extinction. For this, they were cast out. Their legion broken, their souls sundered, their home razed by those they once called brothers. The rubric of Ahriman, that infamous spell that saved them from total dissolution, is not just a tale of arrogance. It was an act of desperation, a last-ditch effort to preserve identity, mind, and memory against the tides of warp corruption. In the centuries since, the Thousand Sons have not ceased their quest. But it has changed. Now they delve not only into knowledge, but into fate itself. They walk the strands of time like librarians stalking forgotten corridors. Some among them, particularly in the cults of the Corvidae and Pavoni, are believed to be unraveling future timelines, trying to avert galactic calamities before they happen. Not for the Imperium's sake, perhaps, but for something older, something more sacred. Knowledge itself, truth, and perhaps, in some terrible broken way, the survival of sentient life. There are whispers, always whispers, that some of their rituals are aimed not at summoning demons but at containing them, that some of the binding circles etched into ancient moons are prisons, not gateways. Ahriman himself, for all his transgressions, speaks often of the great work, a metaphysical task meant to restore something lost. He is no longer interested in serving Tzeentch blindly, if he ever truly was. His war is against ignorance, against entropy, against the slow decay of meaning in a galaxy that has forgotten how to learn. It is madness, yes, but there is method to it. Thousand Sons warbands have been observed avoiding needless civilian casualties, even warning populations before their engagements. In some systems, they've been seen entering ruined imperial libraries, not to destroy, but to recover, to copy, to preserve. Why? Because they know that when the final darkness falls, it will not be brute strength or blind faith that offers hope. It will be memory. It will be wisdom. Their tragedy is deeper than most. Each of them walks among the dust-encased husks of their brothers, silent reminders of the price of ambition. They no longer fight for glory. They do not rage like the World Eaters or revel like the Emperor's children. They study, they observe, they plan. And if the galaxy survives this age of woe, it may owe its endurance not to saints but to sorcerers who once dared to look too deeply into the abyss and refused to look away. The warp has twisted them. They are not what they once were. But buried in their obsidian cathedrals and maze libraries of Prospero's remnants, there may still be a flicker of that original fire. To understand, to protect through knowing, and to defy the death of reason. In a galaxy ruled by dogma and fire, perhaps the cold light of knowledge, no matter how corrupted, is still a kind of salvation. The word-bearers are the true heretics, not just in action, but in spirit. They did not fall into chaos, they dove. And yet, beneath their fervent worship, their genocidal sermons, and their catastrophic rituals, lies an unspoken truth that chills the soul. They were only ever seeking meaning. The galaxy is a pit of silence. The Emperor offered truth without divinity, law without soul. For the word-bearers, that was a death sentence. In embracing chaos, they may have been trying, in their own apocalyptic way, to bring divine order to a universe abandoned by gods. Lorgar was not a warmonger. He was a philosopher, a poet, a prophet. His tragedy was that he believed too deeply. When the Emperor scorned his faith, shattered his temples, and humiliated him before his sons, it did not kill Lorgar's belief, it redirected it. Where once he saw divinity in the Emperor, he now saw it in the warp. And the warp, unlike the Emperor, answered back. Lorgar's fall was not a descent into evil, but a reorientation of purpose. He never wanted destruction for its own sake. He wanted truth. He wanted to explain the suffering of man, the chaos of the stars, and the pain of existence. To the word-bearers, the Imperium is not just misguided, it is spiritually bankrupt. They see themselves as the flame that will reignite purpose in a dead age. Their war is theological. Every battle is a sermon, every desecrated cathedral, a rewritten scripture. But what if their intent, buried beneath the blood and madness, is to remake the galaxy into something spiritually whole? Yes, they summon demons, they flay worlds, they turn reality into a screaming hymn, but not because they want anarchy. They want worship, structure, a galaxy in which faith is not forbidden but fundamental. There are disturbing reports from isolated systems where word-bearers established long-term rule. On these worlds, the initial massacres are followed not by endless war, but by chilling stability. Massive temples are erected, yes, but order is restored. The crime rate plummets. Food distribution is organized under sacred law. Community rituals replace civil holidays. It is not freedom, far from it, but it is purpose. In some cases, refugees from the Imperium have even remained willingly under word-bearer control, so long as they obey the new liturgies and offer prayers to the Chaos Pantheon. It is authoritarian theocracy, yes, but is it worse than the Imperium's hollow bureaucracy and execution quotas? The word-bearers believe they are creating the galaxy anew. A galaxy where every citizen knows their place, their god, their role in the cosmic litany. It is horrifying, yes, but it is not madness, it is a vision. And in the eyes of many within their ranks, the sins they commit are sacrifices made in the name of a greater revelation. They are not anarchists, they are builders. Fanatics, yes, but builders of a new divine empire. Some even argue that Lorgar's retreat into seclusion was not a failure but a calculated move. He seeks communion with the deepest truths of the warp, preparing for a second coming, a return not to lead an army, but to become something transcendent. And his sons prepare for that return with religious zeal, spreading the word in blood and fire, believing, truly believing, that they are saving souls, not damning them. In this light, their horror takes on a new shade. They are not chaos for chaos' sake. They are order through faith, salvation through surrender. They dream not of annihilation, but of conversion, total, absolute, irreversible. To them, the Imperium is the true heresy, a soulless machine pretending to be divine. And they, in their crimson armor and blackened scripture, are the priests of the only gods that answer when you scream. No legion fuels speculation quite like the Alpha Legion. They are the whisper in the static, the shadow behind the throne, the hand that guides the enemy's blade. Unlike other traitor legions, their fall is cloaked in so many veils of deception that even their own brothers may not know where their true loyalty lies. And herein lies the terrible possibility that the Alpha Legion, duplicitous and treacherous as they seem, may still be loyal. Not to the Imperium as it exists, but to the vision of humanity's survival. A survival that may require heresy, war, and the shattering of illusions. It begins, as always, with Alfarius and Omegon, the twin Primarchs, inseparable in mind and indistinguishable in form. Their doctrine was never about brute force or glory. It was about information warfare, infiltration, and long-term outcomes. Even before the heresy, they operated in total secrecy, embedding agents across the Imperium and beyond. When Horus offered them a place among the traitors, they accepted. But whether out of conviction or strategy remains the galaxy's most tantalizing mystery. The Hydra's heads move in all directions. Some Alpha Legion cells still fight alongside Chaos forces, summoning demons and sowing madness. Others, disturbingly, have been caught sabotaging Chaos warbands, assassinating demagogues, or leaking critical information to the Inquisition. And some, the most enigmatic, wage war on both sides simultaneously, weakening both the Imperium and Chaos alike, as if neither deserves to rule. There is a theory, often whispered but never proven, that Alfarius and Omegon saw a future in which Chaos would eventually consume the Imperium. That by joining Horus, they could guide the heresy to a specific failure, one which would galvanize the Imperium into a necessary evolution. Not a utopia, but a crucible. A way to ensure humanity's survival through conflict and revelation. In this view, the Alpha Legion's betrayal was not a fall, but a calculated sacrifice. Their operatives are known to integrate with mortal populations for decades, even lifetimes, living among humans, understanding their needs, protecting them covertly while steering events from the shadows. Some even report Alpha Legion cells on Imperial worlds that fight off both Chaos incursions and Imperial tyranny alike. These agents do not claim loyalty to the Emperor or the ruinous powers. They serve something older, a mission burned into their gene code, known only to the Primarchs. It is this duplicity that makes them so dangerous and so fascinating. The Alpha Legion does not crave dominion, it craves control through influence. They do not need to hold territory, they only need to change the right minds, sabotage the right systems, corrupt the right symbols. And sometimes doing that means appearing as traitors. Sometimes it means burning whole cities to the ground to prevent a greater catastrophe 3 decades later. To them, morality is irrelevant. Only outcomes matter. What if their loyalty is not to the Imperium, but to humanity itself? Not to the Emperor, but to the species he tried to shepherd? In that light, their war becomes something closer to a galactic immune response, excising cancers, even if that means becoming carcinogenic in the process. It is horrifying, it is heretical, but it is also rational, in the coldest, most terrifying sense. No other legion embodies the question of secret salvation more than the Alpha Legion. If they are loyal, their loyalty is buried so deep it might never be found. If they are traitors, then they are traitors in ways more subtle and devastating than even Horus imagined. And if they are something else, something beyond the binary of loyalty and heresy, then perhaps they are the architects of a future no one else can see. One where humanity survives, even if it forgets who made that survival possible. Among the myriad renegade forces that fracture the Imperium's vast dominion, the Red Corsairs are often painted as pirates, mere raiders drunk on vengeance and blood. But this is a narrative crafted by those who fear the deeper truth. The Red Corsairs are not just scavengers of chaos, they are revolutionaries. Their war, unlike the apocalyptic ambitions of the other traitor legions, is fundamentally a rebellion. Not against order itself, but against the tyranny that has calcified in the Imperium's rotting bones. Huron Blackheart, once Luft Huron of the Astral Claws, did not begin as a heretic. He was a loyal servant of the Emperor, a chapter master who dared to question the High Lords of Terra. When the Badab War erupted, it was not over demonic worship or forbidden rites. It was over autonomy, control, the right to rule one's own domain without bureaucratic suffocation. The Astral Claws were punished not for falling, but for daring to govern efficiently. Huron's rebellion began in frustration, not heresy. But when the Imperium labeled him traitor, they forced him to become one. Cast out, mutilated by loyalist fury and barely clinging to life, Huron was remade by the warp, not out of desire, but necessity. The Red Corsairs were born not in devotion to chaos, but as a desperate army of exiles, freedom fighters, and broken loyalists who refused to bend to the crushing heel of imperial decree. Their attacks are precise, often sparing planetary populations unless resistance is met. Their plunder feeds a growing fleet not of chaos fanatics, but of outcasts, Astartes from shattered chapters, guard regiments left for dead, even rogue traitors and tech priests disgusted by the ecclesiarchy's grip. The Red Corsairs' stronghold in the Maelstrom is less a kingdom of madness and more a fortress of secession. It is where those discarded by the Imperium go to survive, and sometimes to strike back. Unlike the Word-bearers or Night Lords, the Red Corsairs do not seek apocalypse. They seek liberation. Yes, their methods are brutal. Yes, they make use of chaos, bartering with powers beyond comprehension to maintain their strength. But their allegiance is to themselves, not the gods. They tolerate daemons as tools, not deities. And their primary target is not humanity. It is the regime that enslaves it. Some whisper that Huron seeks to create a rival imperium, a loose confederation of warbands and sectors where local rule is paramount, where the emperor is not worshipped but remembered, and where the Inquisition holds no sway. It is a dream soaked in blood, to be sure, but not without logic. In this fractured age, survival may depend less on unity and more on adaptability, something the Corsairs have in abundance. They have no Primarch, no ancient legacy of glory or damnation, but perhaps that is their strength. Untethered from myth, the Red Corsairs are free to redefine the rules of the Long War. Their cause is not divine, but political. Their battlefield is not just space, but ideology. They represent the terrifying idea that rebellion might not be evil, that in a galaxy ruled by monsters in gold and gods made of madness, freedom itself may wear a skull-faced helm and bear a demon-forged blade. The Imperium calls them heretics. But heresy is just what power calls resistance. If the Red Corsairs are saviors, they are saviors forged in fire, stripped of idealism, armored in cynicism, and driven not by dreams, but by the unrelenting need to survive and to never kneel again. There is a weight to bitterness that cannot be measured in mere sorrow. The Iron Warriors are a legion forged in siege and betrayed by the very empire they built. Once loyal beyond question, they became traitors not because they sought the ruin of the Imperium, but because they were used, broken, and discarded by it. To understand the Iron Warriors is to grasp a deeper truth of the Long War, that the seeds of heresy are often sown not in ambition, but in anguish. Perturabo was never a monster. He was a builder, an architect of fortresses and defensive doctrines that saved countless imperial lives. While other legions were celebrated for flashy victories, the Iron Warriors were handed the hardest tasks, siege after siege, attrition after attrition. They were sent to bleed so others could shine. And when they asked for recognition, they were met with silence. When they asked for justice, they received scorn. Even the Emperor, it seemed, saw them only as tools, reliable, unremarkable, replaceable. Their fall was not sudden. It was slow erosion, a chipping away of faith, mission by mission, insult by insult. When the heresy came, Perturabo turned not out of greed, but out of fury. His legion followed not to gain power, but because loyalty had become self-annihilation. In the arms of chaos, they found not salvation, but vindication. And ever since, they have waged war not for chaos's glory, but to destroy the Imperium that made them what they are. But in this endless siege against the galaxy, some Iron Warriors have begun to shift, not in allegiance, but in purpose. War bands have emerged that target imperial worlds known for corruption, tyranny, or bureaucratic decay. Some have even fortified planets under their control, installing rigorous but functional systems of governance and defense. These places become stable. Brutal, yes, but structured, survivable. There are even instances where such worlds have repelled Xenos threats more effectively than their loyalist neighbors. It raises a terrible possibility that the Iron Warriors, in their cold hatred, may be creating conditions more stable than the Imperium itself. Not because they love the people, they don't, but because they understand that order, even imposed through iron and fire, is better than chaos in the truest sense. In their own way, they are still builders, still guardians of structure. And if that structure must be laced with barbed wire and mortar shells, so be it. The horror lies in their clarity. They do not pretend to be saviors. They are destroyers, yes, but also engineers. Theirs is not the chaotic madness of the war, but the cold, precise logic of siege calculus. Every act of destruction is a design. Every slaughter is a statement. They do not scream praises to the dark gods. Many among them barely tolerate the warp's influence. Their allegiance to chaos is a means, not a calling. They despise mutation. They scorn excess. They revere strength, order, and the brutal truth that peace is an illusion unless defended by guns and reinforced concrete. Perturabo's dream of perfection was never artistic. It was architectural. A dream of systems that do not fail, of fortresses that cannot fall. Perhaps some of his sons still chase that dream, even as they bury it beneath rubble. Perhaps, in their endless punishment of a galaxy that failed them, they are also showing what could have been. What might still be possible? A galaxy defended not by hypocrisy and faith, but by logic. Cold, ruthless, effective. A kind of peace built not on trust, but on fear of collapse. And in that bleak vision, the Iron Warriors may yet serve a role darker and more vital than any loyalist dares admit. The role of the unforgiving foundation beneath the house of mankind. There is a dissonant beauty in the Emperor's children. A haunting echo of what they were, and the horror of what they have become. Among all the traitor legions, theirs is perhaps the most tragic transformation. From paragons of discipline and aesthetic mastery, they descended into depravity so complete it often seems irredeemable. Yet, if one listens closely, through the shrieking cacophony of their madness, one might still hear the faint, agonized strains of a longing for perfection, not of form, but of purpose. Fulgrim was not merely a warrior. He was an artist in ceramite, a philosopher in motion. His vision for the Emperor's children was to elevate humanity, to embody the ideal of martial and aesthetic excellence. And for a time, they did. Their legions sculpted not only victory, but meaning. Their war was poetry in armor. Even as they began to slip under the influence of Slaanesh, the fall did not appear as madness. It appeared as liberation from the limitations of mortality, a pursuit of transcendence that could no longer be confined by flesh or physics. But the search for perfection, once noble, turned grotesque. As their senses were unshackled, so too was their morality. Perfection became perversion. Discipline turned to delirium. Fulgrim's soul, fractured and reformed by the Prince of Excess, became a prism through which reality shattered. And yet, not all within the Legion were lost equally. There are those among the Emperor's children who still seek perfection not through indulgence, but through clarity. Some warbands focus not on sensory overload, but on the refinement of combat to its most elegant, flawless form. These warriors do not revel in slaughter for its own sake. They view every duel, every kill, as a step toward an elusive ideal. They kill with beauty, not frenzy. Their armor, though corrupted, remains meticulously maintained. Their rituals, though heretical, are performed with sacred precision. These rare individuals, the so-called silent Aryas, or resonant blades, see themselves not as slaves to Slaanesh, but as exemplars of its original intent, to exceed, to evolve. In their minds, the Imperium stagnated because it feared the pursuit of the infinite. And in the Emperor's rejection of worship, they saw a denial of the divine impulse within mankind, the need to reach beyond itself, no matter the cost. Their war is not against humanity, it is against limitation, against mediocrity. They believe the galaxy must be shattered and reforged into something capable of holding true splendor. That might mean the death of billions, yes, but to them that is merely the toll of becoming more. Not hedonists, but ascendants. Not savages, but flawed seraphs in search of their lost music. Even Fulgrim, twisted as he is, speaks in tones not of conquest, but of revelation. His daemon form is a symphony of contradictions. Beautiful and terrible, refined and monstrous. He embodies the duality of his legion, that perfection, pursued without balance, becomes its own annihilation. But perhaps even he remembers what it meant to stand for more than sound and sensation. Perhaps in some impossible moment of clarity, he sees what he once tried to build, a humanity that rose through art and discipline, not broke under them. The Emperor's children are not saviors, but among them, in the eye of their maelstrom, are echoes of salvation through excellence. Misguided, mutated, misunderstood, but not entirely mad. If there is a future where beauty can rise from blood, it may be because someone, somewhere within their ranks, still believes that perfection, even now, is worth striving for. Among the warp-drenched horrors of chaos, few forces inspire as much unfiltered terror as the World Eaters. They are the embodiment of wrath, an avalanche of blood and iron that drowns worlds in frenzied violence. But hidden beneath the gore-slicked fury and the never-ending chants to Khorne lies a brutal, sobering question. What if their rage, the very thing that defines and damns them, was once something righteous? What if the World Eaters are not just berserkers but the galaxy's most broken instruments of vengeance? Angron's story is carved in agony. He was not raised in splendor or tutored by philosophers. He was thrown into the fighting pits of Nuceria, a slave, forced to kill for the amusement of tyrants. The butcher's nails, those abhorrent neuroimplants that turn pain into fury, were hammered into his skull not by the Emperor but by cruel human masters. And when the Emperor finally found him, he did not heal Angron. He did not liberate his gladiators. He teleported his son away, leaving the only family Angron had ever known to die. That betrayal festered. Angron's war against the Imperium was never about chaos. It was personal. And his sons, those cursed warriors who followed him into damnation, took on his pain, amplified by their own versions of the nails. The World Eaters didn't fall into heresy. They were driven into it by a system that demanded obedience over healing, conquest over compassion. In the warp, they found what the Imperium never gave them: release. But fury, even corrupted, still has purpose. And some among the World Eaters wield it with direction. Scattered warbands have been known to descend upon worlds where oppression reigns. Prison planets, forge worlds ruled by sadistic overseers, hive cities drowning in corruption, and unleash unrelenting slaughter upon the ruling class. They do not stay. They do not rule. But they leave behind shattered chains, broken icons, and the corpses of tyrants. It is not mercy, it is not order, but it is, in its own twisted way, justice. To these warriors, the nails are not a curse, they are clarity. They strip away pretense. They leave only truth, suffering, rage, and the need to end what causes both. Some even resist the temptations of daemons, refusing mutation, seeking instead the purity of the blade. To kill, not for Khorne's glory, but because they have nothing left, and in that emptiness, they find purpose. Kharn the Betrayer, the most infamous among them, is a paradox. Insane, yes, but deeply symbolic. His rage is not blind, it is focused. His every strike is a condemnation of a galaxy that turned its champions into weapons, then discarded them. He is the scream of every soldier used, abandoned, and forgotten. And even now, there are whispers that some world eaters follow him not because of madness, but because he never lies. His violence is honest. In a galaxy of lies, deceit, and manipulation, the world eaters offer something rare: authenticity. They do not preach. They do not build temples. They do not pretend to be anything but what they are: wrath incarnate. And while that wrath has destroyed countless innocents, it has also crushed despots, shattered empires, and silenced tormentors who thought themselves untouchable. Perhaps then, the tragedy of the world eaters is not just in what they became, but in what they were denied the chance to be: champions of justice through fury, protectors of the broken through vengeance. Instead, they were weaponized, dehumanized, and unleashed. Now they cannot stop, but maybe, in the blood and fire, they sometimes strike true, and in doing so, become something more than monsters. Avatars of a justice too terrible for peace, and too honest for law. Abaddon the Despoiler has been reviled as the galaxy's greatest villain, Warmaster of Chaos, architect of the Black Crusades, and the one who shattered the Cadian Gate. Yet for all his titles and carnage, there remains a haunting possibility, one that recontextualizes his every campaign. What if Abaddon's true goal is not destruction, but transformation? What if the Black Legion, in its fury, is trying to save the galaxy from itself, by force, by flame, by firelight in the dark? To understand Abaddon is to understand legacy. He was not merely the first captain of the Luna Wolves. He was Horus's chosen, forged in the fire of the Great Crusade, witness to its most brilliant victories and most brutal betrayals. When Horus fell, Abaddon did not follow him into death. He spat on his memory. He rejected the corpse that had been his father, not because he rejected the cause, but because he saw how far it had strayed. Abaddon's rebellion is not a continuation of Horus's failure, it is its correction. The Black Legion is not a remnant. It is a rebirth. Abaddon shattered the old iconography of the Sons of Horus, burned their green armor black, and reforged them into something new. Under his rule, the Black Legion is not bound by the past. It is not loyal to a single chaos god. It is a war engine with a singular vision: to unmake the Imperium of the false emperor and build something worthy in its place. This vision is not mere conquest. The Black Crusades were never random. Each one had purpose: to weaken, to probe, to dismantle specific structures of imperial power. Administratum hubs, astropathic relays, strategic bastions of dogma. Abaddon does not conquer for glory. He does not waste forces for meaningless slaughter. His war is calculated, surgical. He wages a long war not just to destroy but to prepare for something he alone fully comprehends. There are moments when his actions hint at a broader design. During the 13th Black Crusade, his breach of Cadia was not merely strategic, it was symbolic. The gate was a lie, a bastion of false hope. And when it fell, so too did the illusion that the Imperium was unbreakable. In the aftermath, the galaxy did not end, it changed. The Cicatrix Maledictum tore reality in half, and Abaddon, rather than claim dominion, pulled back. He let the galaxy boil in its own uncertainty. Why? Perhaps because Abaddon is not building an empire. He is breaking a cage. The Imperium is a prison, a theocracy of stagnation, and in his mind, only through catastrophe can it be reforged. He has allies among mortal warlords who preach not damnation but liberation. He tolerates sorcerers but disciplines them harshly. He welcomes renegades who reject the gods of chaos as masters, seeing them instead as forces to be harnessed, not worshipped. It is this refusal to kneel, even to chaos, that marks Abaddon as something more. He is not a pawn. He is not even a servant, he is a force, and his Black Legion, a crucible, a forge in which broken warriors are reshaped not into cultists but into instruments of will. Perhaps he seeks not to save the Imperium, but to ensure it is no longer the only choice. Perhaps he sees the long war as a purification, brutal, heretical, but necessary. In a galaxy where the Emperor's dream is twisted into dogma and servitude, Abaddon's vision, terrible as it is, may be the only path that does not end in extinction. If so, then the despoiler is not a villain. He is a dark savior, a tyrant to end tyrants. And the Black Legion in its blackened silence may be the last hope for a different kind of future. One born in fire, but forged by intent. In the vast, shadowed web of the Imperium's countless conflicts, the spotlight rarely lands on the Traitor Guard. They are seen as mere footnotes, mortals enthralled by chaos, cannon fodder for demons and heretic Astartes. But this dismisses a deeper, more unsettling truth. Many of these men and women did not choose damnation. They chose rebellion, and in doing so, they may have become unwilling torchbearers of a terrible kind of freedom. The Traitor Guard are not uniform. They are not legion. They are fractured cells, warbands, cults, and regiments torn from the Imperium's collapsing peripheries. Some are forged in hate, others in desperation. Most were once loyal guardsmen, standing dutifully on fortress worlds, hive cities, and hellish death zones. What changed was not belief. It was betrayal, a governor's corruption, an ecclesiarch's fanaticism, a commissar's execution quota. The Imperium demands absolute obedience, and when it fails its own people, rebellion becomes not only understandable, it becomes inevitable. Consider the Volscane cataphracts, who turned during the Macarian heresy not because they loved chaos, but because they were tired of dying for distant lords. Or the Severan Dominate, which sought independence, not apocalypse. These were not demonic cults. They were insurrections, and over time, as loyalist reprisals grew more brutal, the warp crept in, not as master, but as ally. Chaos, after all, offers what the Imperium denies: power without permission. Among the Traitor Guard, there are those who fight not to spread chaos, but to reject tyranny. Warbands who execute slavers and Puritan inquisitors with equal efficiency. Cells that offer sanctuary to psychers and mutants instead of burning them. Planetary militias who proclaim themselves free worlds, raising their banners not with demonic sigils, but with slogans of resistance, liberation, and vengeance. Yes, many fall to the warp, but many more are simply clinging to the only path left. And in this lies the tragedy and the possibility. The Traitor Guard remind us that not all heretics are monsters. Some are survivors, rebels, dissidents who were pushed too far, who begged for help and were met with silence, and so turned to the only gods that listened. Their fall is not always a surrender. Sometimes it is a scream, a final furious declaration that they will not kneel. Not to Terra, not to chaos, not to anyone. There are stories of entire regiments that still follow their codes of honor, that protect civilians in the midst of their war, that treat prisoners with dignity, even while flying the 8-pointed star. Such stories are rare, but they exist, and they complicate the narrative. Because if the Imperium made these rebels, then perhaps the rot lies not in the warp, but in the heart of mankind's greatest empire. The Traitor Guard may be damned, but they are also mirrors, reflecting the price of imperial indifference, the horror of survival under tyranny, and the raw, desperate will to be more than a number in someone else's ledger. If they are monsters now, then they were made that way. And in their rage, their sorrow, their heresy, they may be telling the galaxy something the loyalists refuse to hear: that obedience is not the same as justice, and that sometimes damnation is the only way to be free. In the heart of the Eye of Terror, where reality folds upon itself and gods writhe in thoughtless hunger, the notion of redemption seems impossible. Chaos does not forgive, it devours. Yet even here, amidst the demonic storms and corrupted strongholds, flickers of something stranger emerge. Not purity, not repentance, but purpose. The question isn't whether these warriors can be saved, it's whether their damnation has become, in some cursed sense, meaningful. Redemption, in the traditional sense, a return to loyalty, a cleansing of sin, is a fairy tale in the 41st millennium. The warp changes everything it touches. Memories twist, morality shatters. A traitor of 10,000 years is not merely a renegade, he is a creature unbound by time, shaped by a reality that obeys different laws. And yet there are instances, whispers in the dark, of warbands and individuals who seek not salvation, but significance. Some word-bearers have turned their sermons inward, not to glorify chaos, but to interrogate it. They question the gods they once praised. They seek truths buried beneath layers of ritual and sacrifice. Some thousand suns, lost in labyrinthine timelines, have begun attempting to undo specific catastrophes, not for glory, but to limit suffering. A few iron warriors have raised bastions not as temples, but as refuges for mortals caught between madness and flame. These acts do not erase their crimes. They do not make them good, but they complicate the narrative. In a galaxy where every major power commits atrocities, where the Imperium burns worlds to preserve order, and the Xenos offer only extinction, the lines blur. If a Chaos Space Marine destroys a tyrant, protects a village, or preserves knowledge otherwise doomed to be lost, does that act matter? Is it redemption, or merely a moment of clarity in an ocean of blood? Perhaps the answer lies in the concept of function, not forgiveness. In the Imperium, a penitent's worth is measured by their utility. The same could be true within Chaos, a warband that brings order to a warp-touched region, that stabilizes reality through ritual, may not be forgiven, but may become necessary. Not holy, but vital. Not redeemed, but repurposed. Ahriman himself, the architect of the rubric, seeks to complete his great work not to serve Tzeentch, but to stabilize his legion. To preserve identity in a realm that annihilates selfhood. In this, he plays a paradoxical role, a villain trying to prevent worse villains from rising. Karn kills indiscriminately, but he also destroys threats that few others could face. Abaddon wages eternal war, but perhaps he delays an even more final doom. This is not hope. This is not light in the darkness. It is the flickering of a candle that does not know whether it should burn or extinguish. These warriors cannot be saved in the way saints are saved, but they may become something else. Anchors in the madness, constants in a variable cosmos, beacons not of truth, but of will. Redemption, then, is no longer a return. It is a redefinition. A Chaos Marine who embraces purpose beyond the gods, who acts out of vision rather than addiction, may not be redeemed in the eyes of the Emperor. But he may, in the end, serve humanity more than a bureaucrat in golden armor ever could. And that is the most terrifying thought of all. That within the eye of terror, amidst the screaming and the fire, there may still be choices. And some of those choices, however blood-stained, might lead not to heaven or hell, but to meaning. What if the traitors were right? It's a question no loyalist dares speak aloud. A question that lingers like a heretical echo in the minds of those who have seen too much, fought too long, bled for causes they no longer believe in. In the grimdark nightmare of the 41st millennium, where hope is a heresy and truth is a weapon, this question does not offer comfort. It offers horror. But horror does not make it untrue. The traitor legions turned on the Emperor not merely out of ambition or madness, but because they saw the rot beneath the gold. They saw an empire that demanded obedience and offered only silence in return. They saw a lie perpetuated by a being too distant to love and too powerful to question. And in their rebellion, whether out of desperation, rage, or revelation, they became the galaxy's ultimate heretics. And perhaps its only honest voices. The Night Lords, in their terror, still punish tyrants. The Thousand Suns, in their damnation, still seek to understand. The Alpha Legion may still pull strings to keep worse evils at bay. Even the word-bearers, mad and blasphemous, offer meaning in a galaxy bereft of soul. These are not acts of redemption, they are not acts of mercy, but they are acts of choice, of intent. In a universe where the Imperium executes billions to preserve dogma, where Xenos seek annihilation, and where the gods of chaos feast on sentience itself, the traitors offer a different kind of truth. It is not beautiful, it is not kind, but it is human, flawed, passionate, broken, and maybe, just maybe, more real than the sculpted myth of the Emperor's perfection. The traitors weep, scream, rage, and laugh. They are artists, madmen, rebels, and kings of ruin. But they are free in ways the Imperium cannot fathom. And that freedom, dangerous, bloody, and raw, might be the only thing that can still shape a future. For the galaxy to endure, it cannot cling to the past. It cannot live by lies. It must evolve. And perhaps that evolution will not come from Terra, from gilded palaces and dead saints. Perhaps it will come from warbands on the edge of the eye, from sorcerers who remember, from monsters who regret. From traitors who, in their heresy, see more clearly than any loyal son ever dared. So ask the question. Let it burn. Let it scald your faith. Because in asking it, you begin to understand the true cost of survival in the grimdark future. And you begin to see that salvation, if it comes, may not wear a halo, it may wear spikes, it may speak in whispers, it may rise in screams. And if you followed this long war of thoughts to its bitter end, consider subscribing. Join the ranks of those who ask the impossible questions, who peer into the warp and dare to blink, because here heresy is not the end, it's the beginning.